welcome inside another edition of IndyStar Preps Weekly, coming to you live this week for New Palestine High School in New Palestine, Indiana. I've been told that it's Stein at the end and not Steen. Here with Neddenriep, Akeem, Glaspie. Keys are falling out of my pocket, but how are you guys?
I'm doing better than you.
Apparently. Kyle, what's up?
I'm doing well.
I think we're good. I just want to power through at this point. Barton doesn't look like in the mood for shenanigans today. The weatherman is here. He's ready to go. We're halfway through the season at this point, right?
Yeah, midpoint. I put out a mid-season report card type of thing this morning. So yeah, I think I did it a week early last year. I looked back as like 4 weeks is not really that. I don't know why I did that, but yeah. So 5 weeks through, and basically 5 weeks to go for everybody, counting the first round of sectionals. So everybody's got at least 5 games left, and hopefully more. You know, if you got designs on making it to the state finals, you have several more, But yeah, halfway through, it's hard to believe that it flies by this fast.
Put you on the spot here, Kyle. Team that you've been most impressed with at the midway point?
I keep ranking Center Grove 1 in 6A, but I've been, I'm very impressed with Brownsburg to this point. I don't think you can argue with what they've done when you're talking about 6A teams, offensively, defensively, just all around. The teams that they beat, went out and beat Fishers pretty handily last week. We talked about them last week. They pushed IHSAA to the limit. Also beat Cathedral. They won their first game against Ben Davis. So, but I think when you're talking about team in any class, it might be the place where we're at today. New Pal's been unbelievable through 5 weeks, and I don't really sense the Dragons are going to be pushed by probably anybody the rest of the regular season. We'll talk about their game this week. But man, when you talk about total dominance, I even wonder how they would do in 6A this year. That's how good they are, and they're a 4A program. So that's one of the reasons we're here today. Is they're 5-0, ranked number 1 in 4A, and having a great season so far.
Akeem, what about for you? From the teams you've gotten to see in person so far this year, things obviously you've read, seen, and on your own though, what's impressed you the most, or what teams have stood out to you?
Yeah, I would have to agree with Kyle. I would have to say it's New Pal. Again, just the talent that they have on both sides of the ball with Tippin and Thomas at running back, and then Thacker on defense, and Isaiah Thacker at wide receiver. Just at every level on both sides of the ball, they have impact players and playmakers, and they seem to be playing really well. And again, Tippett, the transfer that's coming in and first year at starting at quarterback, he can run and pass. He's kind of a point guard of the offense, and he runs it really smoothly. And obviously Thomas can carry the load. So again, I've seen them twice already, and they were dominant in both games. So if I had to choose one team that's really stood out to me, I would have to agree with Kyle and say it's New Pal.
In terms of surprises, have there been any teams that have been better than you expected to be, or not as far along as you expected them to be at this point of the year?
Go ahead.
I would say my biggest surprise maybe would be LC so far, just kind of with the growth of that program that Coach Patterson has. Again, Kyle was out there last year and talked about how he's really building that program up, and kind of just talking to the coach, and just how just fundamentally sound they are on defense. Obviously, when you have a playmaker like Mickens at defensive end, you can do a lot in terms of bringing pressure, but the creativity they use to get pressure in terms of changing up the fronts and who's blitzing and coming from where, and sending defensive backs on blitzes, just what they do to generate pressure is really impressive. And then obviously on offense, you have Ahmad Duff, who's a big play wide receiver. So just I've been impressed with them, and obviously we'll talk about them a little later with a big game they have coming up. But I would say of teams that surprised me, I would say LC is up there.
Kyle?
Yeah, and we'll find out more. Like Akeem said, they play Center Grove this week, and that'll be a huge game and one I'm looking forward to seeing. I would say probably Whiteland to me. Like they're always a good program under Darren Fisher, and they have been for a long time. Always run the ball really well. But the fact that they're 5-0 and ranked number 1 in 5A, and then we talked early in the year, and we've talked several every week pretty much. 5A is sort of open this year. You get Cathedral moves out. You have New Pal move down to 4A. It's just sort of it looks pretty good for Whiteland when you look at the grand scheme of things. Now they will have to beat, some of the teams they beat, they're going to have to beat again in order to make it, to Lucas Oil and where they want to go. But Peyton Emberton and that offense has just been really, really good. And defensively, they've been really strong too. So I don't know if they're a huge surprise necessarily, but I think to be ranked number 1 and undefeated at this point, that may be a little bit of a surprise. And we'll see. They'll match up with Mooresville down the road, but again, Mooresville's not a team that they're going to see in the playoffs. So they're sitting pretty good right now. And you have Franklin lurking out there once they get Max Clark back, and that'll be interesting. They'll have to beat them again. And then there's some other teams out there in 5A, including Decatur Central, who I think is still going to be a thorn on people's side. once the tournament starts. So, it's not like they have a clear path, but I think to this point they've been, a really pleasant surprise.
With Decatur Century, would you qualify them as the team maybe that people are sleeping on a little bit? They could come in and make a legitimate run to Lucas Oil this year?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, because they are typically, they've had Cathedral kind of in their way, and they're always, one of the more athletic teams in 5A, especially. They're fighting through some injuries right now, and they're young in some key places. So that's part of the issue right now for them. But shoot, you saw, how they led Mooresville 17-6 in that game Friday, ended up losing 18-17. But that's, like we said last week, that's one of those backyard brawl type of games. A lot of emotion, a lot of physical play. And I think they're going to be, they're going to be better once the sectional starts, and they'll have some confidence. And, I'm still ranking them in my 5A poll just because I think they're that, that talented, even though they're only 2 and 3 right now. But, so I don't think any opponent they play in the tournament's going to know, like, they're a legit team and capable of going pretty far.
Akeem Kyle brought up Max Clark. Do you have an update on him and how he's been doing on the international baseball circuit and when he's going to be back with the football side?
I don't know when he's going to be back. That's kind of the big question I have heading into the Franklin-Mooresville game is if his availability and also Hogan Denny's availability. I know he's battling an injury as well. 2 of the top baseball players in the state will have a kind of a key impact on that game in terms of football, but I don't know. But I do know that Max had a great kind of tournament down in Florida with Team USA. He's obviously the top-ranked player in his class, could be a potential number 1 overall pick. So, I mean, I would imagine there was a lot of scouts there that were impressed with his 5-tool ability, but in terms of his availability on the football team Friday, I'm not sure. I mean, I would imagine it's up in the air because maybe he's back from Florida. I know he's been taking online classes in Florida and stuff like that, so I would imagine he's back, but I'm not sure. I'd have to reach out to him and find out.
Sure. Let's look at the games that you all covered last week. Kyle, let's start with you. What game were you at?
I had Ben Davis Warren, the East Side West Side rivalry, and it was really fun. Warren had a 21-7 lead in the first half, and it was kind of felt like Ben Davis, kind of let, Joe Walker had a 95-yard kickoff return right after Ben Davis scored. And then it was kind of like, bam, Keith Jackson, the quarterback for Warren Central, long run for a touchdown. He ended up having another one in the second half for a touchdown. But Warren they struggle for whatever reason to run the ball consistently, which is odd, considering their history of that's kind of what they do really well. But other than Jackson, and then they couldn't throw the ball really well either. And then Jackson got hurt midway through the fourth quarter, unfortunately, and then it looked fairly serious. It was a knee. He did walk off, but it looked like it could be something at least will keep him out for a little while. So they're very young. Their offensive line is fairly young. They bring back, I think, everybody on the offensive line next year. They have a senior group of receiver or running backs and Lee Alexander at linebacker, who's going to Navy, who's a very good player, having a great season. But Ben Davis, just too much offense. I mean, they are as good as anybody offensively as far as like the overall amount of talent on the skill position side, in my opinion. Marcus Reese was just outstanding. Lincoln Murph had a huge game. And then that was my first time seeing Thomas Gakowski in person. And, he didn't have probably his best game even, and he still had almost 400 yards passing. So, that kind of goes to show you, he threw an interception the first play of the game, overthrew somebody, but, he has so many good weapons around. I didn't even talk about the running backs, including Elijah Price, who Warren did a pretty good job slowing him down, I thought, and taking him away for the most part. But, they just have so many weapons on offense, including Gakowski, who can kind of get it to where it needs to go. It seems sort of, it's like you look at these games and who does well, and I mean, inevitably it comes, how's your quarterback? It's just such a huge part of, and obviously you need a line to protect him and all those sorts of things, but man, having an explosive quarterback like that makes it such a big difference. And I can't wait. Ben Davis in that sectional. And I think Pike could be a sleeper, even though they're 5-0, because they're playing everybody tough. It seems like for the most part. But man, Ben Davis, Brownsburg. I'm looking forward to seeing what that game might look like down the road in the sectional, because those two teams are fairly similar, I would say, and it'll be fun to see. Even though they matched up the first week, Gostkowski wasn't playing, so. When they play again, that'd be a lot of fun.
Is Pike 0-5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and they had, like I said, had LC on the ropes this week. I mean, they were up. We were kind of following that game. on as much as you can while you're covering games. They were up 14-0 at halftime and ahead in the fourth quarter by 10.
Wow.
And I was kind of curious anyway. That was one of my things to watch last week because LC is kind of that trap game where you get Center Grove coming. You've coming off a couple of good wins over rivalry teams, and then you play Pike, who's winless but better than that.
They almost beat Fishers, right?
They did, yeah. They've been right in a lot of games. But then you have Center Grove next week, for LC, or this week now. But how would that game go? They found a way to get it done. So I guess that's what matters. But really, I think Pike, they play Warren this week. I'm not calling for the upset yet. We'll get to that in a bit. But I kind of wonder if that's maybe a possibility this Friday.
Akeem, you were over at Cecina Heritage Christian. Wasn't necessarily a close game, was it?
Well, it was back and forth early. Heritage Christian took the lead. Kyle Antoine, a short touchdown pass to Christian Dora. But then Cecina responded with 20 straight points. DJ Mendez is a really elusive quarterback, and he can kind of extend plays. Brandon Fitzramsey is a really talented running back, so they kind of led the charge there. And then once Cecina took the lead, it was the defense that kind of took over there. When we spoke before the game how important it would be for Adam Young and Tamir Woods to put pressure on Antoine, and they both had one sack each, multiple tackles for loss, and then that pressure led to 2 interceptions from Madden Burial, and the defense kind of held them down and really took over late in the game. So it was an impressive performance by the Cecina defense, and the Cecina offense did just enough to kind of hold off the comeback and pull out the win.
Absolutely. Any other takeaways or anything else you want to touch on from this past week, boys?
No, not really. I mean, I think the fact that we're at the midway point and people can read, the IndyStar.com, kind of what I had, for that story as far as kind of give out some mid-season awards and look who's doing well. I think one thing, though, and I touched on it briefly, was Decatur Central and Mooresville. And Mooresville, without Hogan Denny, like Akeem mentioned, they are pretty limited as far as who Patterson can get the ball to. So what do? You give it to him 25 times to run, and he's such a big guy. I mean, and he had 160 yards or somewhere in there rushing, and that kind of goes back to they did that a lot 2 years ago with him, and then last year tried to throw it more to utilize that side of his game. But it's a pretty nice, to be able to have to rely on where he can run the ball for you and make things happen on the ground. I don't know if they want to run him that much or if he even want, that's, you don't want to do that every game because you'll end up, taking some risk to run him that much. But in that sort of a game, you're going to put the ball in your best player's hands. So, I think his numbers at the end of the year may not look as impressive just because, they got some different guys at receiver that are trying to get worked in now. But, he's still a big part of that team being 5-0, obviously. I mean, he's the reason. So, credit to Mooresville, getting that win in a tough environment and a tough rival. So I think that's another takeaway from last week.
I guess it's time now for picks. We don't have the official numbers yet. The folks behind the scenes are still working on that, I've been told. But
they're tabulating the chads. Is that the?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're checking scores. Reading boxes. You know how it goes. This was at Kyle's behest because we wanted to confirm. But what we do know is that Akeem finished better than Kyle last week, so Akeem has once again reclaimed the lead. Akeem, this has to be really exciting for you. Really special what you're doing this year.
Yeah, I kind of predicted that it would come to this. Just the work that I put in, the research, the tape grinding, it's definitely been paying dividends, and I expect to end the season with the lead too. So I'm calling my shot now, I guess.
He's calling it. He's calling his shot.
And what folks don't see is the phone book of information and research and printouts that you have. Like, you've taken out entire forests, and I appreciate it because I get to sit on it like a phone book during games to see over the bench. But for you, there's just so much knowledge in there, and it's fun to see this sort of thing pay off and come together.
Definitely. Again, it's a lot of hard work on my part. I don't have the advantage of 30-plus years of high school coverage that Kyle does. He's been doing this since before I was born. But
before you was born.
The lowly former producer turned high school insider is I'm the little engine that could.
Right.
I'm definitely an underdog. So if Kyle does happen to come back and win, it's to be expected. So I'm kind of hedging myself right now, an emotional hedge of sorts. But I do expect to come out on top, though.
No breaks, baby. No breaks.
Exactly.
We love to see it. Let's get started with this week's fun and games. Let's lead it off with Lawrence Central at Center Grove. Lawrence Central 3-2, Center Grove 4-1. Akeem, you won last week, so we'll let you start.
Yeah, I spoke about how impressed I have been with LC so far, but Center Grove is kind of a different animal. Again, their streak ended, and they've been kind of coming back and performing like we know they can. Tyler Cherry was amazing last week. 12 of 13 passing, 3 touchdowns. He's kind of been improving every single week. And once they have that element through the air, I mean, they'll be hard to stop. So I'm going Center Grove.
Yeah, Noah Coy, who is his top target at receiver, another baseball guy. He has been – I actually had him in one of our offensive players of the year at the midseason point. He has more than half of their receiving yards from Tyler Cherry. So, he's been key for this offense because this offense hasn't really – been quite as dynamic on the ground as they normally have been. So it makes you wonder with LC, can they take away the run and sort of make them try to beat them down through the air? And LC's got pretty good secondary and back seven. So I'd be curious to see. I'm looking forward to this game maybe as much as I have any game this year. I'm going to take Center Grove though at home. I just think you go back. LC hasn't scored a point, I want to say, since 2018 on Center Grove.
Really?
Wow. So this has been about as lopsided as possible in this series over the last few years. So it's a good measuring stick for LC to say, all right, where are we? This Center Grove team isn't the team of the last 2 years. They're not as dominant, I would say, but still a very good team. And so, hey, you go out there, you play loose, you play to your strengths. And I'm sure they're going to be ready for this. I'm sure they were probably somewhat, like I said, with the Pike game, maybe looking forward to it a little too much, going into last week. So, we'll see. I think these guys are going to be ready. Tylen Cunningham and Josh Mickens and that defense will be ready to play, and they've got the weapons on offense to make it tough for Center Grove. But I'm going to take the Trojans just because. Why not? Because you pick the Trojans until they get beat.
Absolutely. Akeem, you also went with the Trojans?
Yes, I did.
All righty, next game for us, Zionsville 4-1 at HSE 5-0. Kyle, who you got there?
Yeah, huge win for HSE last week to beat Westfield. And I know, I think we both picked that game correctly, but even so, you kind of wondered how would HSE come back from that Fishers win and how would they perform against a Westfield team that hadn't lost a conference game in over 2 years. So that was when you're in. Westfield's not quite what they've been, but even still, really good win for HSE. Defensively played really well. Zionsville comes in, and I was wrong about this game last week. They just smacked Noblesville 39-7 last week, and I thought with Noblesville's offense, they were going to give them trouble because they've been giving everybody trouble with their ground game. So, Zionsville, one of the more complete games of last week, I would say. HSE playing at home. This is, coming off 2 really tough games the past 2 weeks. Christian Abney for Zionsville is going to make it hard for HSE, I think. All that said, I'm going to take the Royals to win and I think it's just going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be a field goal type of a game again. I don't think HSE is going to be blowing teams out this year, but I think there's a lot of confidence within that team, and they have some explosiveness with Donovan Hamilton at receiver. I like HSE to win this game.
Akeem?
Yeah, I agree with Kyle. I mean, it's definitely a toss-up type game. Zionsville's only loss was to Westfield. HSE just beat Westfield, so by the transitive property, I think HSE wins.
I like a good transitive property observation.
Exactly, yep.
I'm a sucker for those. The Battle of the Unbeatens at Roncalli next week. It's Lutheran and Cecina both come in with 5-0 records. Akeem, you've seen Cecina last week. Who do you got in this one?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Cecina's front seven is going to be key because Lutheran's passing attack is one of the best in the state. Sophomore quarterback Jackson Willis, 21 passing touchdowns to just 2 interceptions, over 300 yards per game through the air. He's one of the best quarterbacks that we have in the area right now. So I'm a sucker for talented quarterbacks. Like I said, Cecina's defense is really good, but I think Lutheran has the advantage, so I'm going Lutheran.
As much as I want to pick a different team than Akeem, I just feel like Lutheran is just, there's something about that offense that, 53 points a game. They've just been, and they haven't lost a conference game, and kind of like Westfield, they hadn't lost a conference game in over 2 years. Last team to beat them was Cecina, but I just think with their, with what they've done offensively, they're going to be ready for this challenge, I think, although the Lutheran offense versus Cecina defense is going to be a very interesting matchup with Tamir Woods on Cecina's side and Barry Alt. They're very good on that side of the ball. Again, I think it's close, but I feel like the Saints are going to be the team here.
Westfield at Brownsburg. Westfield 3-2, Brownsburg 5-0.
Yeah, so this is a couple years ago, Brownsburg came into this game and I think felt like they were the better team. They ended up losing in I think it was 42-41 in an overtime game, and 43-42. Westfield went for 2 and got it to beat them at the end of the game. This kind of looks like that type of a scenario too. Playing at home, this is a Brownsburg team that's won. Obviously, they've been as impressive as anybody. Westfield, I'm sure, feeling like, hey, we got to get back on track after losing last week. So kind of a trap game might be the wrong word because Brownsburg knows how good Westfield has been. But again, Brownsburg they got 3 running backs now who can all get 100 yards for you, with Balance going for over 100 last week. So I just think there's too many good players on that side of the ball for Brownsburg, both sides of the ball. I like Brownsburg to win this.
And I agree. I mean, Brownsburg has been one of the most talented teams and kind of performing like that that we've seen so far. And again, just really dominant performance. Another talented quarterback in Jaden Whitaker. So again, I'm a sucker for talented quarterbacks. So I'm going Brownsburg.
Whiteland at Martinsville. Whiteland 5-0 on the year. Martinsville 4-1. Akeem?
Yeah, and Kyle kind of talked about the trap game, and then obviously Whiteland has Mooresville coming up next week. So that could be, again, you don't want to get caught looking forward. Anything is possible. But and the status of that's next game. But yeah, Martinsville, I picked them last week. Really like their offense, but I'm going Whiteland.
Yeah, Martinsville came back in that game. I think scored with under a minute left to beat Franklin, 27-26. And, that was obviously a huge win for Martinsville. They're 4-1 now, so they should have some confidence going into this one. Again, Whiteland, though, has been so good. I mean, they've beaten some really good teams along the way. I'm going to agree with Akeem and take Whiteland here, too.
Have you guys split up and differed on a game yet? Or are we all?
Not yet.
No.
All in lockstep.
Kyle's playing defense on me.
Yeah. I need to catch up, though. That's not going to help me.
Yeah, this isn't. True. You should be the one playing defense here, Akeem. Let's shift over to Franklin 3-2 at Mooresville 5-0.
Yeah, I feel like with not knowing for sure what Hogan Denny I don't think is going to play in this game for Mooresville, so I think it's going to be a tough game, and I would kind of assume Max Clark would be able to come back coming off. Again, we'll have to check on that to check for sure, but that's sort of the unknowns of this game. But and Mooresville again, they're 5-0, but it hasn't been like they've been throwing up tons of points and coming off of what was a really physical game last week. Can you get back out there and play at your top effort again Friday? But I just feel like, gosh, it's hard to pick against Nick Patterson and that Mooresville team. I'm going to take the Pioneers to beat Franklin.
Akeem?
And I'm going to agree. Again, obviously,
boy, here we go.
like Kyle said, the status of the two kind of star receivers could sway the outcome if one plays and the other doesn't, or if they both do not play.
Take a chance, man.
We don't know.
Take a chance.
No, and I can't until Mooresville proves defense. Otherwise. I'm saying I'm a sucker for talented quarterbacks. Nick Patterson is one of the best around, and again, if he's taking on an added rushing load, maybe it'll be a little lower scoring game. But I think Mooresville can pull it out, so I'm going Mooresville.
Pick Franklin, coward.
Yeah, you got a chance to build your lead, and you're not doing it. Not taking it.
Warren Central 2-3 at Pike 0-5. Akeem, who you got here?
Yeah, again, injuries can kind of maybe determine this one as well with the status of Keith Jackson at quarterback for Warren Central. But let's hope he does play, and I'm going Warren.
Yeah, this again, Pike has kind of been where are you mentally? You're 0-5, and you haven't been able to get over the hump and get these wins. Can you bring that same effort even though you're 0-5? And that's kind of where you wonder. But I think, Mike Brevard, first-year coach at Pike, I think he's going to have these guys ready to play. I kind of wonder about Warren Central, because that loss to Ben Davis, I'm sure they felt like, man, we're in good position to beat a really good team. I think they were playing probably as well as they had in a lot of ways for a chunk of that game. And then they had some blown coverages, some just some bad errors, some things that definitely need to be fixed. And it's been kind of a tough turnover year for them as well. So, I'm going to go ahead and pick the upset since Akeem won't pick any upsets, and he just kind of sits on his throne in his tower here and looks down on me.
He's resting on his laurels.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm going to pick the upset because I'm the underdog. I'm the underdog now.
Oh, yeah.
So,
okay.
Oh my gosh. Tri-West 4-1 at Lebanon 3-2. Kyle, who you got in this one?
No one believes in me. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying. Tri-West, I picked against them the last 2 weeks, and I've been wrong. Because they come out last week and win a really good rivalry game against Danville. Had to come back in that game, so it was kind of the opposite. The week before, Ty Owens ran for a lot of yards against Western Boone. Comes back and they rely on their defense and him throwing the ball again last week against Danville. So 2 really good wins back to back, and this Lebanon team, I'm telling you, is better than what people maybe know about. They have a good quarterback. They're a good team this year. But after picking against Tri-West, I'm going to come back to the Bruins side this time, and I'm going to pick Tri-West to win at Lebanon.
Akeem?
Yeah, like Kyle said, Lebanon is kind of turning around after a 1-2 start, kind of showing some signs of improvement. But unfortunately, I'm not for Tri-West's sake, but for the sake of our picks battle, I have to agree with Kyle, and I'm going Tri-West as well.
So not unlike Tri-West last week, you're leaning on your defense in a good passing game, huh?
I'm just trying to pick the right games, independent of what Kyle does. Clearly I'm on a hot streak, so
he's packing it in, Kyle. I don't like it. We might have to alter some rules here to prevent this from happening again, 'cause it's just embarrassing display of cowardice so far. Roncalli 5-0 at Brebeuf, Jesuit 3-1. Akeem?
Yeah, again, we talked about dominant performances, and Roncalli has been one of the most dominant teams around. Luke Hansen can carry the ball 50 times if he needs to, one of the top rushers in the nation right now. So behind that talented offensive line they have with multiple Division I recruits, it's kind of hard to pick against Roncalli, so I won't. Roncalli.
All right, Kyle?
Well, Luke Hansen, he's over 1,300 yards on the season now, and, that's one of the top in the country, leading the state. I think he's still leading the state, but that's I assume he has to be with those sort of numbers. He was my offensive player of the year for the midseason at this point. Just and a hat tip to the offensive line for Roncalli, obviously too, because he does not doing that alone. But yeah, you have to pick Roncalli. I think here, Brebeuf. I actually have a story coming out this week too about Brebeuf and Nolan Buckman, who is kind of making a transition to playing some receiver for them. He's still getting some reps at quarterback in practice. But sort of an unselfish decision on his part where they need help at that spot, and he's willing to do that. One of the better wrestlers, too, in our area. But, kind of a cool thing, I think, an unselfish move on his part to try to get that offense going. They're not going to, this is probably going to be a season where they're just not as dynamic as they had such good receivers last year with Ani and Walters, and he doesn't have those guys to throw to. Have to try to do some different things. And we'll see how that pans out, and what they end up doing against Roncalli. But I think at this point, it's just hard to pick against Roncalli and what they've got going. So I'm going to agree on that one.
All right, the game that's going to be played here on Friday night at New Palestine, Greenfield Central 4-1 coming down the road to play here at New Pal. New Pal is undefeated on the season, one of the top teams in the state regardless of class. Kyle, who do you got in this one?
I like New Pal, but I will say I think Greenfield Central, and we talked about it some I think in a previous show, but there's the program 7-4 last year. Basically, the only teams that are kind of been beating them consistently are Mount Vernon and New Pal. And that's a credit to Travis Nolting and that coach at Greenfield Central, who's they run sort of a wing T offense that's very ground centric, but they have a quarterback now. Dallas Freeman, who can really throw the ball well. So they have that dynamic to them now that's been a little bit different than what they've had in the past. But again, New Pal, it's just going to be really hard to beat them. Unfortunately for Greenfield, they're in the same sectional too. So as much progress as you make, you're still running up against a really good New Pal team. But I think this, Greenfield's kind of building, kind of like they have here at New Pal, for the long run, for the program, not for one good year. It's for the upcoming several years, and they've kind of lined themselves up well, kind of like New Pal has under Kyle Ralph. So, it's just it's going to be hard to see. New Pal seems to be on a collision course eventually to play Roncalli in 4A, and I think that's sort of where this, barring injuries and something unforeseen. But I think, again, for Greenfield, a good chance to come out and see, how do you stack up against one of the best teams in the state, regardless of class? How far does our program still need to go? How far have we come? And I think we'll find out. And they're very, they're very scrappy, and I think we'll give New Pal all they got. New Palestine, I think, just has too much for him.
Akeem?
Yeah, I mean, if you're running a wing T offense, maybe some misdirection, and maybe they can catch New Pal's defense, kind of off guard or leaning one way and reverse the other way, but I don't think that will happen. They're just so fundamentally sound on defense. Thacker is one of the best defensive tackles that I've seen. He's so disruptive, and that's one thing that could really blow up a wing T. If you put some pressure right up the middle, that'll make it really hard for them to kind of do what they need to do. So I said New Pal's been one of the most impressive teams I've seen all year, and I don't expect that to stop, so I'm going New Pal.
All right, the boys differed on one game, I believe it was, and that was the Pike game, so we'll see what happens this week with the picks. Hopefully it's a great week for both of you. I support both of you, and I'm not at all embarrassed by Akeem's picks this week. But before we get out of here, I should ask, what do you boys got coming up?
Akeem's got something coming next week. Well, I won't give it away yet, but it's about one of the players we just talked about. Or coming soon. I don't want to say next week or when it might be.
Coming tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Sometime soon, sometime in the next week or so, I'm going out to Roncalli and talking to Luke Haenchen. Just again, kind of finding out what motivates that guy to do what he does, to shoulder the load that he does. Again, he's had games with 30 carries, just putting up really good numbers. So just kind of want to see what motivates him. On the college side, I'm actually working on a story about UND running back Toriano Clinton. He's about 40 yards away from becoming the UND's all-time leading rusher. So that'll be interesting. He's a Chicago guy, but just UND's kind of had a history of talented running backs there. So he's the next one in line, and maybe might even have some pro potential, kind of a speedy guy. And then I'll be at the Colts game on Sunday, so the home opener there, and it's kind of a must-win for the Colts already in Week 3. So Pat Mahomes coming to town. That's that'll be interesting.
Should be fun.
Here's the good news: the Colts are not 0-2. I keep looking at the standings.
You're right.
Like, you know what? They're not, as much as it feels like they're 0-2. They're actually not. So
but if you tie the Texans, that's a loss.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like they're 0-2.
Yeah,
pro ties. I like them. More ties in the NFL. Kyle, what do you got coming up?
I've got a story on Park Tudor. A couple of girls. It should be out Wednesday morning, I believe. But they have a girl kicker who's a good soccer player, and then a linebacker who's a freshman who is playing mostly
linebacker.
Mostly playing JV, and she's about 5'2".
Good for her. Yeah. That's badass.
And she ripped the ball away in a JV game and almost returned it for a touchdown. So kind of cool. And Park Tudor had a girl, woman coach on the football staff. Coaching the team a couple years ago, and she's since moved on. But I talked to her about that too, and just kind of, I think it's cool when you have, and I talked to both the girls players about this, but they mentioned, they had a little girl come down from the bleachers and mention like, hey, I love watching you play, and I think that's, maybe they don't even know what they're doing exactly, but it can be, something other girls can look up to, them playing. It's not that unusual necessarily to have a girls kicker, but the fact they have a linebacker playing too, I thought was cool. So. That should be out tomorrow morning. And then, like I said, I have a story on Nolan Buckman. I think will be out roughly around probably Thursday or something, then the normal predictions and whatnot.
Good stuff. As you're watching this show, you've probably already seen a story up. Talked to Audrey Lowry, a softball pitcher who's going to Oklahoma, 6-time national champion. They won it the past 2 years in a row. So pretty awesome for her to get to go play at her dream school, a group that she grew up watching and kind of inspired her as a pitcher and stuff. So it's really neat talking to her about that. A story on Camera Banks, who's a name that you're going to become real familiar with in the next couple of months. She's a freshman at Decatur Central. Already has offers from like Mississippi State, Purdue. All the big wigs are coming out for her. Arkansas is in on her. Cool kid, really very mature for her age, both physically and just in talking to her. You can tell that she's wise beyond her years, so she's going to be a fun kid to watch. And then who knows, there'll probably be some surprise mixed in there too. We obviously have soccer selection shows coming up Sunday. We have Marion County tournament this weekend. Soccer city championships I think are next week, so we're hitting high speed here, full go for fall sports on my side too.
And we should probably mention too the canceled game at Attucks between Attucks and Purdue Poly Friday. Kind of one of those unfortunate situations, and the game ends up being canceled, and they can't play. They couldn't reschedule because of bus, getting the kids there and whatnot. Just didn't work out. So, but again, the referees, for whatever reason, it's sort of, I think, probably a miscommunication at some point. But I really thought Chris Chang, the Purdue Poly coach, sent me an op-ed Saturday, basically, and said, and then I asked him, hey, do you mind if I use this for my Monday column, basically, and we ended up breaking that out. But, he basically said, and I think he's right, if this is Fisher's HSC or pick your big rivalry game, New Pal and Mount Vernon, that probably didn't happen this way. They probably, the referees are there, and whatever happened to, I think they thought one of the referees had said had picked another game, had contracted another game, and they thought they'd given them a heads up, and then that didn't end up happening. So then you end up with 500 people and 2 teams with nothing to do, no one to play. And so it's unfortunate, and definitely, and you only get so many of these every fall, and these 2 teams in what I think would have been a really good competitive game too aren't able to play. So I thought he really did a good job of conveying the message of his thoughts on it and kind of where he comes from as far as the adults kind of needing to take some responsibility there.
How does that work with officials? Do they pick their games before the season, or is it a week-by-week basis?
Yeah, they'll contract them out, and then there's a kind of a confirmation process, and I think that's kind of where you maybe end up going, because I think 4 of them were on the same crew together, and there was another one who did show up to the game, but obviously you can't referee the game with one guy on the field. So yeah, there's a process to that, and I think that's kind of where the hang-up came on what actually happened there as far as confirming or not confirming. So, but yeah, there's a process there that obviously whatever was supposed to happen didn't happen, unfortunately, and that's kind of what ended up making it not have a game on Friday.
So do those teams, will they have a chance to make up another game, schedule another opponent, or is their schedule loaded through?
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of limited by, and they said, hey, it would have been nice to be able to come back and play Saturday. I talked to the Addicts AD actually yesterday, and he said it's just hard, kind of with their, students, it's hard to get everybody kind of there again on Saturday and get them bussed over to Purdue Poly. So, that was an option they talked about. They weren't able to do it. So, yeah, you're just going to end up with one less game, unfortunately.
That's a bummer situation. But we thank you all so much for watching. We'll be back again next week from a location that's to be determined. We thank New Palestine so much for hosting us. For Akeem, the picks leader. For Kyle, the picks runner-up. I'm Brian Haenchen. I'm too stupid to pick games. Thank you all for watching. We'll talk again next week.